I'm just going to go through the interface and get you guys familiar with the software we're going to be using this unit. So the first thing you'll notice about Autodesk Maya is the vast amount of buttons all over the place. And yes, there are a lot of buttons, and there's a lot of hidden buttons that we can't even see. If we click on these different tabs here, for example, and if we click on these drop-down lists, there's a lot of options in this software. But don't be intimidated. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to go through and pick out what buttons we need. For the first portion of our unit, we're going to be 3D modeling and just getting an idea of how Maya can manipulate objects. So what I'm going to do now is just show you the setup that we're going to be working in for the majority of the time without getting too bogged down with the details. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring us to the drop-down list that we need in order to begin 3D modeling. And in the top left corner here we have a little drop-down list called Animation. And this drop-down list, if we click on it, you'll notice that we've got a number of other options in the list there. It's important that we choose polygons from here. I'm just going to zoom out here. Now, take a look. I'm going to click on this again. I'm going to put it back to animation. And take a look and keep an eye on the different things here. So we have geometry cache, create deformers, edit deformers, skeleton, skin, constrain. Don't worry about what those do yet, but take a look. They seem to disappear once we switch this menu option. I'm going to go back to polygons. And when we do that, the skeleton, skin, create deformers totally changes. We have a whole new set of items. So our menu bar here at the top, and if you're in Windows, this also is at the top as well, switches depending on what we've chosen here. And there are a lot of options in here, but we're just going to focus on polygons for now. So once we switch there, that's good. Let's take a look at some of the other things that change depending on what we click on. So for here, we have what's called the shelf. And our shelf has many different tabs. We've got curves, surfaces, but what we're going to look at is polygons. As you can see, when we click on that, we have spheres, cubes, cylinders, cones, planes, and a whole bunch of other different types of objects here. So now that we've got the right tab on the shelf selected, I'm going to show you the two different ways to create a polygon. Now if I go up to Create at the top here, you'll notice that Polygon Primitives is a drop-down option. And we've got Sphere, Cube, Cylinder, same as we have Sphere, Cube, Cylinder over here on the actual shelf. But there's one important detail that I'd like you guys to look at, and it's an interactive creation. Notice how there's a check mark right beside interactive creation here. If I click on this and I go back, notice how the check mark is now gone. Now interactive creation means when we add in a sphere, a cube, cylinder, or any of these objects here, it asks us to interactively create the shape and size of that object. So with interactive creation turned off here, it actually allows us to just simply click on an object and then there it is for us. We don't need to shape the size of it and everything. But for now I'm going to delete this object just with the delete key. Go back to Create, Polygon Primitives, and turn on Interactive Creation. And I'm going to show you what that means. For right now, I'm just going to start off with a cube. So I'm going to click on this. And notice what it says in the middle here. It says, drag the base on the grid, then pull up for height. So if I just bring my arrow in here and I click and I hold the click and I drag, you'll start to notice that it creates this green outline. And what this means is it's creating the base size of the object that we're creating right now. So if I let go, now it says drag up to set height. So I'm going to click again and drag upwards. And notice that it's creating this object in a vertical direction. And I let go there. So based on the different ways to interactively create an object or just have it automatically made for you, you can see that turning off interactive creation is actually very helpful and a lot faster than having to make the base and height of an object. Now that we've made our three-dimensional cube, you'll notice that it's a little bit difficult to actually see the dimensions of this. There's a lot of curved arrows around the edges, and on the corner we have these blue little squares, but we can't really see the 3 dimension of this too easily amongst all of the different things that are there. So we can make this a little bit easier for ourselves by turning on what's called Smooth Shade All. If you notice up here, there's a bar of little cubes, and currently we're set on the wireframe cube. And what that means is we're looking at wireframe of the object that we've got created in our main view here. And these little black lines indicate the fact that we're looking at wireframe. And the fact that it's transparent, we can see right through to the grid, indicates that it's in wireframe mode. But if we click on Smooth Shade All, you'll notice that it fills in all of that area with a gray sort of color here. And what this does is it allows us to get more of the depth or a sense of space with the fact that the gray is turned on there. So Smooth Shade All is very important. Now the alternative to doing this, if you don't want to have to click on these little buttons here, the number 4 key allows you to switch to wireframe, and the number 5 key allows you to turn on the shaded mode. And there are other options up here amongst this little toolbar, but we won't get to them today. In fact, we might not use most of these. It's just a matter of what we need for right now. So we've created our first 3D object. That's great. But now we need to know how to move it around and manipulate it. So what I'm going to do next is on the left-hand side, we've got all of our tools here. And I'm just going to show you a few of them, as we won't need most of them until later on. The first one we've got here is called the Select tool, and this simply just selects things. As you can see, this has a gray outline here. If I click over here, that selection disappears. The green turns off, letting me know that I no longer have this object selected. But if I click on it, then you'll see that the selection comes back. That's basically what the Selection tool is for. Pretty straightforward. So the next tool I'm going to show you is the Move tool. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to simply move your object around. So if I click on this, you'll notice we get a blue, a red, and a green arrow pointing in these different directions. If you've worked in any 3D environment before, you might actually know what these represent already. In the bottom left corner, there's a little indicator to help us with what these actually represent. This is our view axis, and you'll notice that on this we've got a little blue line, a little green line, a little red line. One is our Z and our Y and our X. And what this basically means is it's representing the direction that we can drag an object in, whether it's the Z depth or the X-axis or the Y-axis. So if I bring my arrow over top here and I click and hold on the green arrow going up, you'll notice that first off, just by clicking on it, it turns yellow. So that's normal. If I click on this axis, it turns yellow as well, and the red will turn yellow as well. What this indicates is that we've got that object and that axis selected. So if I click and hold on the Y-axis, the green axis, then if I click and drag upwards, you'll notice that I'm moving the object up, and if I bring it down, I'm bringing it down. Okay? And if I do the same with the other axis, I'm essentially just moving the object on either the X, Y, or Z axis. And you'll notice as I move this that the channel box on the right-hand side here has a translate, let's see if I can move that out of the way here, has a translate X, Y, and Z. Keep an eye on this as I drag this around. So I'm currently moving the X-axis here. I'm going to try the Z. You'll notice that those values change as I move this object around. This is very important as you begin to 3D model, to keep an eye on your coordinates, I suppose, for the object that you're moving around. These will definitely be vital to animating, but for 3D modeling even, it's good to know where your objects are sitting, and this channel box will go in a little bit more detail a little bit later on as we need to throughout the course. Now if you don't want to go over to the left-hand side and select the Move tool, you can also just hit the W key on your keyboard. So I'm going to click away here, and let's just grab the Select tool. I'm going to click on it, and I just hit W, and all of a sudden it just switches me over to my Move tool, and I've got those axis selections already up there. Now you've also probably noticed earlier I clicked away, and then I clicked back on the object. Notice how I didn't need the Select tool to do that. If I'm just in my Move tool or the other tools I'm about to show you, you don't necessarily need to always go to your Select tool, which is the Q key, but you do have the option if you just want to select something with that. But I can easily just go to my Move tool, click away from something, click on it, and I get my axes back to move and manipulate. Now there is one more way to move around the object with the Move tool. See this little yellow box in the middle here? If you click and drag this around, it allows you to manipulate the object on all the axes, X, Y, and Z. But it's not very accurate. As you can see, as I'm moving it around, it kind of dips into the grid and then comes out. And I would recommend sticking with the actual arrows that pop out of the Move tool. I'm very quickly going to show you the Rotate tool and then the Scale tool just after that. Now the Rotate tool on the left here can be activated with the E key on the keyboard. As you'll see, you've got these little circles going around the object, and as you've probably already guessed, you can click and drag on those to adjust the rotation. And if you don't want to drag along one axis, you can drag along every axis, again, just by clicking in the middle here and dragging around until you get the desired rotation that you'd like. Again, it's not very accurate, but sometimes you might need to do this. And noticing over here on the right, our channel box is in fact being changed and manipulated as we do that. Now if you want to, I want to undo all of these things that I've done. You can go up to the Edit option and go to Undo Rotate, or Command Z on your keyboard if you're a Mac user, but if you're a Windows user, it's Control Z. Now I also know you don't necessarily need to hold down Control or Command on your keyboard to do this. Simply tap the letter Z and you'll see it undoing most of the actions that we've done there. Shift Z will redo an action if you want to put everything right back to the way it was. There we go. So let's put all of these rotation values down to 0. I'm going to click and drag across all three of them, hit the 0 key, and hit Enter. You'll notice that all three of those values went down to 0. So that's through clicking and dragging on those. So lastly, we have the Scale tool, and this one allows you to manipulate the object by stretching it on either the X and Z axis as well as the Y axis. You can also grab the middle here and click and drag, and it'll expand it in all directions. So play around with that. So these tools are going to be the basic tools that we will end up using in Autodesk Maya.